Hey everybody, it's Kelly. Welcome back to another episode of Ask a Therapist. This week we're talking about gender. As many people deconstruct the social norms that have been put on them as far as sexual attraction and sexual identity, gender tends to be the next thing that comes up for debate within ourselves. So today we're talking about what gender is, what gender isn't, and some maybe more helpful ways for you to handle that process in your brain so that you can be able to live the most fully you possibly can. We're going to start off with some facts. Gender and sex are two different things. In general, they get interchanged a lot. Sex is what you are assigned to be when you are born. You have no say. It is based on what your body looks like. And there are essentially three options: female, male, and intersex. That's it. And even in general, intersex isn't always an option. That gets really complicated, but those are your options from a bodily standpoint when you are born. Gender is a social construct. Masculinity, femininity, these things are social constructs and have meant different things across the board in different ages at different times. If I were to ask any of you to define what you thought femininity was, for instance, or masculinity is, you would likely, if you are prescribing to the same gender norms that most of our current society is subscribing to, you're looking at
feminine as pink and flowery and submissive,
and masculine as blue and black and, aggressive or forward facing.
The problem with that is it leaves out entire facets of people's personalities. So I would challenge this. We are all familiar with the yin yang, right? In Taoism, the yin yang represents good, bad, light, dark, masculine, feminine, all of it being in one circle and all of it being a balance of each other, because you can't have one without the other. There still is a force, there still is a receiving of the force, there still is energies prompting and energies pulling back. In general, in Western culture, we interpret that as we are looking for our mate or our perfect match in order to fill out our yin yang, in order to complete ourselves. We're actually all complete people in and of ourselves. If you are looking at yourself as the whole circle, cultivating both your, for lack of a better term, masculine and feminine energies should be the goal. Now, if we're going back to the yin yang, in Taoism, it's also expected that none of these are in and of themselves negative and none of them are in and of themselves positive, but they all need one another in order to make the complete balanced circle. That is how I would challenge you to start thinking about things like masculine and feminine energies. When we're talking about specifically naming a gender that someone has, if I were to tell you what gender I am, I get the right to tell you. You don't get the right to pick that for me. What that looks like, you may interpret differently. I've often wondered why we're so ready to quote things like, when someone tells you who they are, believe them, when we're talking about the negativity of someone, when someone over and over again lies to you, or when they take advantage of you, or whatever they're doing negatively. And the statement we make to ourselves or to others are, well, they showed you who they were and you should have believed them. But when someone in your world tells you who they are, sometimes we don't believe them. It seems a little backwards when they're just trying to identify themselves to us so we know them better. We're going to insist we know them better than they know themselves. Gender identity and gender expression are two different things. Gender expression is how you are on the outside, how you exhibit to the world who you are within the vein of the social constructs of gender. And your gender expression can change daily, can change hourly if you wanted it to. It definitely changes every time you change clothing, but it changes depending on your stance and how you're presenting yourself. And the perception of those around you is at least half of what your gender expression is right then. Because someone may interpret the way you're standing as a more feminine stance, or they may interpret how you're standing as a more masculine stance. That's their interpretation, but that's what they're going to assign to you. So your gender expression, what you're giving off into the world, is for them to consume and maybe reflect back to you. Gender identity is for you alone to identify. More and more we are seeing people who are on a fluid spectrum when it comes to gender identity. And for a lot of people that is very frustrating. They want to either be male or female. They do not want to entertain anything in the middle of that. The thing that we forget when we either try to make gender identity binary or try to make it non-binary is that there's always going to be someone on the other side of that needs it to be that other thing. There are people that the identity that fits within the binary is what fits them best. And there are people that either side of this spectrum that we entertain from female to male and back again, that they're most comfortable somewhere in the middle there. There's nothing wrong with either of those or anything in between, because your gender identity is up to you. The reason I emphasize that so much is because for a lot of people, the way that the world has seen them is how they have seen themselves. And so the idea of having the freedom to decide who you are and assign your own identity to yourself and claim that as your own can sound maybe both freeing and scary. So just a reminder, like with everything else we do, your process is valid. No matter how short or how long it is, no matter how many times you switch directions or change your mind, no matter how many people you tell or don't tell, your process is yours. That makes it valid because you are valid. For many people who do not come to their understanding of sexual identity until a bit later in life, maybe out of high school, out of college, in their 20s and 30s, the idea of gender identity never actually enters into their reality until well after they're able to identify what their sexual orientation is. The language that we have now to identify feminine and masculine trait, to understand gender and male and female as a social construct in and of itself that changes by society, is a new concept specifically for people who came to all of this later in their lives. That journey might not take you where you think it's going to take you. Because of not having that language beforehand, that can feel like an almost more daunting thing to take on than sexual orientation is. That's okay too. Your journey towards self-actualization is yours, on your time, on your terms, and on your definitions. If that's not something that you feel like you need to entertain or think about right now, or maybe ever, okay. And if it's something that consumes your thoughts in general, that's okay too. I mean, in general, I advocate for nothing actually consuming your thoughts because I want you to be like a rounded individual and have lots of different passions and ideas, but that's another video. The problem in a lot of this is that still our society insists on the binary and insists that binary matches how you were assigned at birth when you, remember, had no say in it. Part of this obsession, actually, let's say the majority of this intense focus on the male-female dialogue and the male-female binary and the roles of men and women is actually, get your surprise faces ready, coming from the church. The idea that men and women had to be individually distinct from one another and could be complementary but could not handle any responsibilities or even any gifts as a human. It's another facet of the church's control, and that will be another video I will be doing because I think it's important for you to see where that comes up both in church and in society as a whole. But the point that I'm trying to make is that even that force, that expectation, that understanding that our society has comes from a history of the church changing the way different societies experience themselves and experience each other's in order to be more like the white Western culture. While I'll never be an advocate for cultural appropriation, we can learn so much from cultures that see anywhere from 3 to 5 to 7 to hundreds of genders of their people. Those societies are open and free to people's experiences in a way that modern Western society is not. Whether, say, America ever gets to that point, I couldn't tell you. But all it takes is a fairly simple Google search to know that our understanding of male versus female is in the minority of societies in our world, past or present. That's it for today. I hope you found this helpful. Go head over to our community tab and make sure that you are voting in our poll for which of the gender videos you want to see next week, and we will get that up for you. Until then, take care of yourselves and each other.